show is a live broadcast of truth seekers and believers, empowering the evolution of consciousness. Raphael and Celeste will dive deeper than the mainstream media while answering the mind's deeper questions and transforming conversations. They will have unique guest speakers who will share knowledge, tools, and techniques to create coherence in our mind, body, and spirit.
Good morning, Celeste. How are you?
We're good, and good evening from beautiful Cairns.
Nice, nice. So you're on holiday.
We are on holiday. That's why I thought I have to show off my beautiful summer hat. We
Love
are
it.
in Australia.
Love
So
it, love it.
for all that want to have a beautiful snorkeling holiday in the most incredible oceans, come to Cairns. It really is quite an experience. We love it.
I love it. So we're pretty excited today. We have a great guest coming on, Peter Anthony. I know you're very excited. You were talking to me about all the different companies he's been at and how impressive it is. And when we think about communication, right? It's one of the biggest things in business that we should always look at, right?
Yeah,
But being that we have an expert, we should bring him on, shouldn't we?
we should.
Yeah, let's bring him on. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
G'day, Raphael. G'day, Celeste. I'm very well. It's a little bit late for me. It's 8:30 p.m.
That's early.
And I heard Celeste just mentioning about the beautiful weather. I'm one of these nutcases that gets up at about 5 in the morning and gets in the ocean at about 5:30.
Love
So
it.
I'm swimming early, and I do most of my things early in the morning. So,
Nice. Well,
Where
just so you know, it's 4:30 a.m. for me right now.
Yeah.
I noticed that. I'm very impressed that you guys are up and looking so sharp that early in the morning.
That's me. I'm in New York, so that's why
Yeah,
it's a
so
little later for you guys.
it is. It's a 7 p.m. one for me here in Cairns, Australia.
Oh, you're in Cairns.
Yes, just on a holiday, just for this episode, Mr. Anthony. That's why I thought I'd wear my hat. So
Oh,
just to
wow.
show off that I'm on holiday, because we're awfully happy about that.
Mm.
Any
Well,
opportunity to snorkel.
oh, wow. I used to own a little place a bit north of Cairns called Yorkeys Knob Beach. It's about 2 beaches north of where you are.
Okay.
There's about 10 great beaches between you and Port Douglas, and Yorkeys Knob Beach is the first of them. I had a little holiday place there for a long time. It's a
Oh,
gorgeous part of the world.
it
Nice.
really, really is. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it is.
really is.
Yeah.
So where's ocean for you now that you're saying you have your cold, beautiful morning swim? Where is that?
The ocean for me is in Manly. Uh,
Manly,
so,
Sydney, or Manly, little Brisbane?
no. Manly, Sydney. It's if you know Sydney, there's like a harbour, a huge harbour in the middle. Then there's northern beaches and southern beaches. Manly's on the northern beaches,
Yeah.
and it's just perfect for swimming. There's little you swim through the ocean, then you swim out to little bays and headlands, and it's just particularly this time of the year, it's just a gorgeous place to live. You get up, you get some exercise, you see your friends, you're in nature. Uh, if you're lucky, you can watch the sun rising as you're swimming just on the ocean, and it's great for snorkeling too, Celeste.
It is. I actually
Mm.
know Manly in Sydney, and I find it absolutely gorgeous
It
because you're
is.
sort of
It's a
not in Sydney, but you're part of Sydney.
Yeah.
yes. I don't like being in Sydney's a bit too like busy and congested and a bit too much activity. I like being a little bit out of it. And then if I need to go to the city, I just catch a ferry across. I'm in the
Yeah.
city.
Not
Yeah.
like
So,
Mr. Raphael in New York. How do you do that every day? How's life in New York?
You asked me that earlier. So Mandy's out here, and she says, I wish I had an ocean to dive into. It's 4:30 a.m. also for her. So thank you, Mandy, for joining us. And she's in Canada. So I know in Canada it's kind of cold.
Yeah.
wow,
Well, it's all
wow.
about the icing in the morning, right, Amanda? So get into it, man. It's your ice bucketing. It's how to get the lymphatic system going.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the things, because I didn't get to go to the ocean, I did take a nice, very cold, frozen shower this morning, and I loved it. It's funny. I sometimes look forward to my cold showers because
Yeah.
I that invigorating feeling, it's like, wow.
Oh,
And, when I think about the people who do the polar bear plunge, and I was thinking like some of them tiptoe in, and then some people just jump in, and then afterward, but they're only going for 30 seconds. And I'm like, you got to go in and really enjoy it. So thinking about the three of us right here, what are we doing? We're communicating, aren't we? We are
yeah.
Is that an
communicating.
existential
We
question,
are.
Raphael? Why are we here? Is there any point to
Yeah. Oh,
existence?
yes. Where do we go? What's the purpose?
Well, think about the fact that we have this beautiful thing called the internet, that we can communicate with different parts of the world, and we are able to share our stories. But communication is either storytelling, right, or information. What do you think, Anthony?
Storytelling or intimacy? Is that what you said, Raphael?
Information.
Oh,
Information
Information.
too.
information.
Well, that's part of. I
Next
think that's part of it
episode.
as well.
Different episode, different podcast.
Yeah. Different episode, Anthony. No, but it's true. I actually saw that was one of my really big questions, Anthony, because I first of all, I love your website because you've got so much free technical tools as well. So I really wanted to say thank you, but also compliment you on that. And one of my questions was about the storytelling. So why not just have a pitch or conversation, but telling stories, and that sort of connects you with the people. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a question that I struggled with for many years. The first question was why stories, and the second question is how stories. Uh,
Hmm.
why stories is the best way to explain it, Celeste, is if you watched a movie in the past year or so that you really enjoyed. Have you watched a movie you've enjoyed?
Yes.
Yes. Can you ask you what it was? What the
So I actually got to see Avatar, The Way of the Water,
ah
just recently. Yeah.
okay, cool,
Yes.
cool.
Very deep. Very.
My daughters watched that, and they encouraged me to go and see that too. So, how did you feel during Avatar? How did you feel at the end, in particular? How
Well,
did you
it
feel?
came with a feeling of sadness and
Yes.
awareness as
Yeah.
well. And I think a
Okay.
lot of people just walk away and go, "Oh, amazing graphics and this and that." But the message is so important that they're actually sharing with us.
Yeah.
Hi, Mandy.
Exactly.
Mandy's back again. So it's describing the feeling. I would say sadness, awareness, and almost like tribe, my passion and my love and the importance for my tribe.
Mm.
Okay. Okay. So you how you felt at the end. Yeah. Now, what you were just explaining is an example of what's called narrative transportation, which means when you're watching a great movie that really engages you, you get transported into the story.
Mm.
You feel like the characters feel, and you literally feel the same way they do. I mean, the last great movie I watched, I'm a bit old school. The last great film I watched was Top Gun 2 with Tom Cruise. So I like
Good
action and
movie.
adventure and planes and that sort of thing. And I felt just like he did throughout almost the entire movie. Now, you think, why stories? You think, well, one great reason to use stories in how you're communicating, whether that's business communication or whether that's like a personal communication, is that people get transported into the story. And while that's happening, they suspend disbelief.
Mm.
Like if you, it's almost the opposite of a meditation. In a meditation, you're attempting to separate yourself from the reality in front of you and get that space, that observer's perspective, if you like. When you're in a great story, you lose that observer's perspective and you get lost in the story. So in that state, you are much more influenceable.
Definitely.
And messages can be transported to you better because you're in that narrative transportation state. Too deep, or does that make sense?
No, that's beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you're in a different state, and the telling us that we are hardwired to receive information by way of story. It was only in the mid 1700s that books got printed regularly by Gutenberg. Before then, everything was oral transmission. It was primarily by way of story. So I was just reading a fascinating book recently about the evolution of the human brain, which I find fascinating, like from the amygdala back upwards again. And one of the studies in the book talked about they'd been digging up archaeological remains from caves, and they noticed on the caves there were the typical like drawings on the caves. What they found really interesting was that the drawings in the caves were in the parts of the cave that created the most echo and the most sound, the most resonance. And what the experts were suggesting or hypothesizing was that they picked those parts of the caves to draw the pictures because they were telling a story, and resonance inside the cave gave the story some drama, and they were, if you like, creating that narrative transportation with the folks that they were talking to in the cave. So that's one great reason. That's two actually. One's narrative transportation. The other is this whole idea of being hardwired in our subconscious to receive information. But a lot of people say to me, because I work obviously in a commercial environment, and they say, well, surely stories are for kids and putting them to bed at night or for going to the movies. But you say, well, how do stories have a commercial impact? Like, how well do stories work? If you're pitching, for example, pitching an idea or making a presentation in a commercial enterprise, you think, well, the typical thing to do is to pull out a slide deck. I pull out a whole bunch of PowerPoints and start the deck. And if in doubt, add more PowerPoint. And I'm very anti PowerPoint. I find as I work, the less PowerPoint you have, the more effective it's going to be because it gets in the way between you and the people you're communicating to. But you think, how commercial is it? And you think, well, Shark Tank, the pitching program on TV when like young entrepreneurs come in and pitch to the sharks. Well, only 60% of the entrepreneurs pitching to the sharks win the investment, but of those, 80% use stories. Yes. So we know stories have commercial value too. So there's a great reason why to use them, but most clients I work with is they get the why, they just don't know the how. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to translate a message into a story. They get stuck and they go, oh, I can't do this. It's too hard. I'm just going to resort a PowerPoint deck.
I know.
Go ahead, Celeste. No, go ahead.
Because when you say how, because I know that there's some beautiful inventors out there of, let's say, a product or a project. But when it comes to presenting it with, smoke machine spotlight, they absolutely freeze because they maybe don't have that resilience or even the courage. So, and I noticed a lot in your content, you emphasize a lot to have courage, which also comes with confidence. Why is it that people get so shy, even though they are the inventor? Where does that come from? And how would you help them?
I think it comes from vulnerability, Celeste. I think it comes from vulnerability. And I've worked with a lot of CEOs, senior people who are bulletproof, male and female, and they feel like once they reach a senior position in an organization, they can't be vulnerable. They've got to be bulletproof. They've got to look great, talk great, feel great, only get great results and have no vulnerability. But I love the way that you phrase that when you used vulnerability and courage in the same sentence, because I like a lot of the work Brene Brown's done on vulnerability. And I love the way she explains vulnerability. She says, you've got to have the courage to be vulnerable. And she refers to the ancient Latin root of courage, which is cur, C-U-R. And translated from the Latin, it's about telling the story of who you are with your whole heart.
Mhm.
So and that means you must be vulnerable. And you think, why? Well, you're going to build a better relationship when you're vulnerable. It's hard to build a relationship with a brick or an iceberg. You need a level of vulnerability. And what I find in my relationships, whether that's with my wife or with my kids, of which there are 5, or my mates I swim with in the morning, I find that the quality of the relationship is the quality of the vulnerability that people are comfortable sharing with you. And I
It
find
also
that
comes down to honesty, isn't it? Being completely
it's
honest.
about honesty. It's about honesty. And a lot of the execs I work with, they think of vulnerability as like being binary, like I'm vulnerable or I'm not. But you can dial up and down vulnerability. You can just you haven't got to be completely exposed and vulnerable, but you can offer some vulnerability. And you think, well, why would I take that risk? Why would I take that courage? Well, like most courageous journeys, the reward is the result of the challenge of the journey. And you think, well, what's the reward? I'm going to build a better relationship, and I'm going to build a vehicle within which you can achieve things together, whether that's a personal relationship, a friendship, a romantic relationship, a business relationship. They work in very similar ways. And it does require a level of trust, a level of authenticity, and a level of vulnerability. And that's where stories become key. And a lot of what I'm doing with people is teaching them key stories they need to tell, showing them how to do it. I can't tell their story, but I can pluck the story out of them and then have them tell it. And it's amazing how transformative it is. In fact, a lot of therapy around anxiety. For example, I know some therapy one of my daughters had for some time. It was all about just telling a different story to herself, changing the narrative, if you like.
Right.
That was like the movie Life of Pi.
Yeah.
Remember that was actually a story of a little boy who survived the crash, and he was on the boat with these people, and he retold the story in them being animals, and that the expression of his experience and the feelings that came with it.
Yeah. And that's true. It's really curious. I mean, when I first started working in stories, it would have been maybe 11 or 12, working on a lot of big pictures, and I was a classic slide deck, PowerPoint guy, and I knew it wasn't working. It does work if it doesn't work. And I started studying seriously on stories, and I find I don't do anything lightly, Celeste. I'm a very intense person. I'm no good at the surface. I've got to go deep, right? So a mate of mine was teaching script writing at the Australian Film, Television and Radio School at Fox Studios in Sydney. And I went to his course and learnt script writing. I learned like a story. I learned how to write a movie script, even though I didn't want to write one. I want to understand stories. And it's interesting how every great movie follows the same shape of drama. And what you do when you're watching a movie, you're watching yourself. And one of the reasons you like watching a great story or hearing a great story is you're watching yourself. Like that journey in a great film or in a great book. I mean, what happens? You meet a central character or the so-called hero. You meet them pretty quickly, and you learn what they want. They want something. Like in the Top Gun case, I haven't seen Avatar, so I can't use that as an example. You meet Tom Cruise, you know him already, he's Maverick, and you know that he wants to be relevant. I mean, he's getting by the end of his use-by date. He wants to still be relevant. He still wants to serve in the military. He still wants to fight for his country. He still wants to make a contribution. So you meet him, you like him, you know what his motivation is, but then you work out there's things in the way. There's obstacles in the way. And his obstacles were age. He had some like fractious relationships with some of his senior colleagues. Then the mission was quite challenging, and it got more challenging, and the time frame shrank. So the stakes get higher and higher and higher until eventually he succeeds. Now we're watching ourselves. I mean, Jung talked about the heroes. It's a Jungian psychology, I guess, way of looking at the world. And what he talked about was that there's an inner self, an inner subconscious self that beckons us on our call to adventure. Only we can hear it. No one else can hear that call. And what we're watching in a great story or a great book or a great movie, we're watching ourselves, watching our own hero's journey, which is one of the reasons it resonates so strongly with us. You think, well, I don't want to watch Top Gun, I'll go to Avatar. I want to pitch and win. Well, how do I take the structure of that story and translate that into my pitch? Well, I've got a hero wants something. The hero's never you. It's always the client or the client's customer. Like if I'm working with a big consumer goods company, their hero is always their consumer or their shopper. They want something, but there's something getting. I was working on a big campaign recently with a big food manufacturer, big retail food provider globally, and they wanted to insert more vegan alternatives into their range of products globally. That's what, and the consumers and shoppers were looking for more healthy vegan alternatives. A lot of vegans and people want to try or have vegan options, but they weren't sure how to choose vegan. They wanted the health of the vegan style or the vegan alternatives, but they didn't know how to get them. They didn't know who to trust. So the campaign became about that shopper, which is primarily female, unfortunately, globally, and what she's looking for, but why she can't have it. And then the product becomes, I guess, part of her hero's journey in terms of helping her realize her dreams or realize a healthier food alternative she can put in amongst those meal alternatives. Does that make sense?
Oh, a lot of sense. Absolutely.
And my job is to translate the pitch into a story. That's, and fortunately, it pays really well.
You know, I was just about to ask, what was your best, like your personal best life experience while you were teaching these experiences to other people, like in terms of communication? Because I was looking into Virgin, Rio Tinto, Westpac, Nestle. These are huge multi-billion-dollar
big clients.
So what was your most your personal most remarkable experience that you would say you changed someone else's life, but you also had a bit of a life-changing experience?
Well, my life-changing experience, the story I tell is the story of how I struggled with stories. I mean, if I'm talking to a commercial client, I'll say, look, I had at the time, I had 5 relative children, had a big mortgage, a stay-at-home mum, which was great. So I had 7 people to support and a dog and a cat. Right. So
let's not forget them.
That's 9 altogether, or 7 people and 2 animals. And also my daughter's always got friends staying over. The house is always full of people, which is great. Extra food and lifestyle, right? And I said, look, I got this idea of stories, and I thought, and I did go to the script writing school, and I came back with this very awesome understanding of the shape of drama. I failed miserably because I completely overcomplicated it. And rather than going forward, I went backwards. I mean, I was in situations where I couldn't explain what I was talking about because I overcomplicated what I was attempting to explain to people. And what I found was that I needed to strip it back to its fundamentals and then learn how to apply those fundamentals to other people. I mean, I've got lots of stories I tell in my workshops. I can give you one. I can give you what I just thought of. I'm not sure I should share this publicly, but one of the first times. But why not? Let's be vulnerable.
It's okay. We won't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody. Just keep it to yourselves, okay?
You got it.
So I was working. I won't say who it was, but it was a globally recognized recruitment platform, like a platform for jobs, if you like, a global platform. And I was working with a regional director, and I was running workshops for her, pitching in this part of the world. And then she got promoted to a global role, like a global strategic role. They decided to have their conference in the Bahamas, of all places. And she said, Peter, I really like your work. Can you come to the Bahamas? You've got the hat ready.
She's ready. She's coming to the Bahamas too.
And talk about storytelling. We've got a global group of people. I thought, wow, that would be really cool. Bahamas is always in the back of my mind. I think that Americans always talk about going to the Bahamas. So surely it's great. So I took her up on the offer, flew to LA, I think to Miami, down to the Bahamas, staying on Paradise Island, gorgeous place. There's a huge casino there. I think it was called Jupiter's Casino, with a great big King Neptune with a green fork up and down on the building. Imagine this huge, like you're lying on the beach, the huge, I don't know, must 10 high, with a huge neon Neptune with his fork going up and down like this right on the building. Right, bizarre. I'm lying on this beach. This is really cool. There the day before, get prepared, get organised, and it was a big conference room. It sat maybe 1,000 in this conference room, and I was the keynote speaker, which amps up the pressure, right? Amps up the pressure, and so I prepared all my stuff, had no slides, it was all going to be stories. And I got there and I talked to the AV guys, and I said, is there going to be a stage here? They said, yeah, there's going to be a stage here on the how far, because I was walking up from behind a curtain, like from the left behind this curtain. I said, how far is the stage out? And he said, oh, it's going to be 8 steps out from the curtain. And they put some gaffer tape down, and I measured out 8, because I was coming out in the dark. I was coming out, I say, good evening and welcome. I say, good evening and welcome. My hands up, classic, good evening and welcome. I'm Peter Anthony. I'm here to tell you your business using the power of stories, right? And I practiced that, walking out, opening my piece, walking to different parts of the stage inside the gaffer. It comes that night. I have a couple of starts at about 6 o'clock in the afternoon or in the early evening. The crowd starts clapping, right? That's why they're clapping so loud. And of course, I walk out behind the curtain, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and fall off the stage. Right?
Oh my goodness!
Right up the stage, and it was about my shoulders.
Oh.
So I fell. I walked straight up. So here's me, huge speaking opportunity, guest speaker, paid, flew a long way. And I walked off. That fortunately, I had a lapel mic on. And fortunately, I didn't say anything untoward as I was falling. Something
right.
inappropriate. But fortunately, you know what happened? This is how fortune favors the brave. Fortunately, I literally landed on my feet. I walked off the stage and landed on my feet. So I said, good evening and welcome. And as I said, welcome, I fell on the ground with my hands out, right? Now, Celeste, the audience thought this was all part of my act, right? They thought, oh, wow. And they was like burst into applause. Like, wow, what a great act. He just walked off the stage and landed on his feet. Started sharing ideas on stories with the crowd. So sometimes bad things can have good purposes, or sometimes accidents something that's quite valuable, and that worked out to be quite valuable. They had it on video, and they had the whole thing. I was what are those guys called? Like Thor and Loki and those guys, the Avengers. I look like an Avenger. I look like Iron Man.
Really coming down.
Yeah, I work in theatre, and the moment you said to me, the stage manager told me 8 steps forward, I said, oh my God. That was it. I knew in my heart, in my stage manager heart, I was like, oh dear.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
So I
But
walked off the sofa. So that fortunately that worked. But when I'm like talking to you, or when I'm working in workshops, whether it's virtually or face to face, I'm very vulnerable with people. I'm very me.
Mm.
I'll talk about I'll talk about me. I'll like I did with you straight away. I share a personal experience, get a sense of who I am. I attempt to be as real as I possibly can with the folks I'm talking to, because I need to I need to represent what I'm recommending.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
And be as raw and honest to also then be able to have other people feel open enough to be on that same level.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I'll just
May-
going to share another. This wasn't my example. It's an example of a client, and how stories can be transformative. There's a I won't mention the brands, but there's in this part of the world, up until about 3 years ago, 3 globally aligned clothing brands were owned by a company in this region, and they were owned by a different company in the rest of the world. And the CEO of the company that owned them here rang me and said, Peter, I'm pitching our business to the global business, sell it to them. Can you come and help me work on the pitch? It's going to be my retirement fund, basically. I said, great, come and talk to me. I went to him and I said, look, pitch it to me. And he pitched it to me, and I said, do you mind if I'll say it's Ralph. Ralph, do you mind if I'm honest with you? He said, yeah. And I said, it's boring and it's confusing.
Mm.
And it's really hard to bore and confuse somebody into agreeing with you. I said, look, what is the story of these brands? I mean, how did you come by them? How did you build them? He said, oh, it all began with my dad. 80 years ago, 70, 80 years ago, he started a very small apparel company. He had 3 sons. The 3 sons got ambitious. We bought these brands in this part of the world, and we've consistently grown them until they're household names. And I said, so how long has the business grown for? He said, well, it's been growing now ever since we acquired the brands. It's been part of our family. It's challenging in a way to sell them, but we have to, because my dad's reaching the end of his career, and we want to grow the business. So it's what you're really talking about. It's like a family story of growth. So let's tell that story. Let's tell the story of your dad and the brothers and how the business started, because what you're really selling to this pitch in Tokyo is you're selling a story of growth. That's what you're selling. You're selling growth. And they'll get transported in that story because that's what they're buying. We worked on it hard. He was a bit hard to coach Celeste because he was a little bit wooden. Like, he wasn't that sort of animated. He was very robotic. He was originally an accountant. Nothing against accountants. I love my accountant. He was very, like, he had the very rigid type of a guy. He even stood rigidly and dressed rigidly and talked like a robot. Had to loosen him up a bit, like get him to do some exercises, get him a little bit looser than what he was. And they pitched in Tokyo and they won it. And he sent me a text at like whatever it was in the morning, Tokyo time, and he just said, yeah, mission accomplished. It worked. So it definitely works. It definitely, I know it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think being unique in every approach that you bring a story to, right? Being unique and being yourself, authentic also, right? I think that makes a huge difference.
And one of the things I love about your podcast, Raphael and Celeste, is that it's unique. And I mean, I only started podcasting, like guesting, around 5 or 6 months ago, and I joined a matchmaking service to find, because I was told by my friends. I was at a storytelling event one night, because I go to storytelling events where we tell stories, and he said, you should podcast. I said, I don't want to run a podcast. I don't guest. It's like a dating thing. It's like, you've got the guests and the hosts that bring you together, like a dating thing. I said, I haven't dated in like, God, 30 years. He said, no, I'm going to date. Just got to get on I was thinking, and I got on it. I thought so many of these podcasts are so vanilla that they're so nothing. Like, why would I listen? I come across you guys. I thought, this is really unique. I really like this. I listened
Oh,
to it and
thank
watched it.
you.
I thought, this is unique. I like this. And I'd like to be part of this.
We've
And
got
you
very
are. And you are.
guest
Well,
speakers like you.
I'm sure your
one thing
listeners
you
feel the
just
same
said,
way. I'm
Peter.
sure your listeners are really engaged in what you do because it's unique and it's valuable. And
Yeah.
that's your value proposition, right? It's unique, it's valuable, and it's hard to replicate by a competitor. I mean, I've lost count of the number of leadership, entrepreneurship podcasts I see on this matchmaking service. I just, wow, another one. What's different? If I'm a listener, what's different for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're real. That's one thing.
Yeah,
And
you are real.
we definitely come. One thing you just said, and one of the things I always do is listen to the words. You said you haven't dated in 30 years. Does your wife know?
Yeah, that's right.
What I'm trying to say is you should be dating your wife.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, right. No, she no, I won't go there. No, we have a healthy relationship. Let's put it that way. We have a healthy relationship.
That's awesome.
And she's. I mean, if ever I wonder whether there's a universe or a higher power or a God, if you like, I look at her and think, wow, what an awesome gift. And every time I look at her, I thought she's so gorgeous, and I love her so much, and I just love her more and more every year. I just think she's awesome. I think she's awesome. Yeah.
Well,
she's really awesome. Yeah. Sometimes she gets a bit annoying, Celeste.
that's there to remind you, of everything.
She's there to keep me on my toes. Like keep
So, Peter, I have a
one of her
question.
favorite expressions with me, Celeste, what she says to me often, she says, "Stop facilitating me."
Oh,
look at that. So, Peter, a question for you. As parents, why is it that we always shut the kids down when they want to tell stories so often? And they have huge voices when they're children, and when they become young adults, they're quiet. You could barely hear them, right? Not all, but some. And it's because they've been saying, stop it, don't talk. You're to be seen, not heard. So how much damage does that cause a child to not be able to be authentic, to be able to tell their story and kind of close up?
Love that question.
Sorry, Celeste, what did you say?
Sorry, I said love that question. I love that question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And clearly it's something I've been encouraging with my children since they were little. I think it's hugely damaging because I think we think and feel in stories. I think it's part of how we think and feel, and I think our relationships are stories. Our friendships, our romantic relationships are stories, and I think our parenting is also a story. So I think to take that away, you're taking away an essential ingredient of a relationship. And if they can't tell stories or they can't share stories with you, that's going to be challenging for the relationship. And if you think about what I find with my friends, like I swim with in the morning, with my kids and with my wife, what I find is the quality of the relationship is the quality of the stories that you share together, good and bad.
Right.
And I'm concerned when I'm not hearing stories. I think something's wrong. It's like my little radar. I'm not hearing what's going on. That's not quite right. It's not just talking, because you can talk about anything, right? You can talk about random things, but it's like engaging me in a story. And one of my daughters is exceptionally good at this, so I can blow her trumpet. She's very good at this because there was two ways she's good at it. One was when I used to travel a lot when the kids were young because I was working all over the world when they were little. And I made a special point when I came home to make sure I put them to bed or bathed them, put them to bed, and had a real relationship with them. And when my daughter Belle was about 4 or 5. Like I'd be reading them stories from books, and she said, "Dad, I don't want to hear a book story. I want to hear you to tell me a story. Put the book down. I want you to tell me a story."
That's
I said,
awesome.
"Fair enough." And together, I invented this detective dog called Nipper the detective dog, and he was a dog that solved crimes, right? And every time I was flying home, like from anywhere I was, I'd be working out a Nipper story to tell. And then she started correcting me or adding to the story as she got into the story idea, and we'd actually tell the story together.
Mm.
And I had really special times with her. We just laughed and we thought about how the story would unfold, and that's still a really important part of our relationship now. And this is now 14 years later, 13.
Oh.
But she still remembers that time that we told stories together. But she's taken it even further, Raphael. She's a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, she suffered some very serious anxiety for a couple of reasons. She had like a body image issue. She had a toxic relationship with a boy. There was a lot of serious things happening. She stopped going to school, and her life was pretty much a mess. And I was the one closest to her because we had that connection from the stories that we told.
Right.
It created an emotional bond that you can't break. And I took the typical Tony Robbins approach, like I would. I just take massive action and change and all that sort of stuff. Because I'm the walk on fire guy, right? Which is the exact opposite of what she needed, right? I'm just take massive action, just change, just get up and get some exercise and eat and go to school. That's like
That's not understanding, by the way. Not understanding what she was going through, right?
Yeah. So I realized two big things. One, and I learned a lot about anxiety during that time. That I learned obviously tiny steps, but I also learned because we were talking in the kitchen one night, and I said, "Bill, no matter what goes on, just remember you're enough. Like you're big enough, you're strong enough, you're smart enough, you're beautiful enough, and all you've got to be is enough. You've got to be more than enough, less than enough, just enough." And that became like our catch cry, like an NUFF, enough. And she loved it, and that became our joke. And then that was like a springboard she used to start making some really positive changes in her life. Because the other big mistake I made, Raphael, in the story of my daughter was I thought if I loved her more, she would feel less anxious. Another huge mistake. I'm really good at making mistakes, but at least I'm giving it a try. I thought if I love her more, she'll be less anxious, but that wasn't working either. What I found worked was that if I helped her find out how to love herself again, that would be the beginning of the path for her. Like love herself enough to get out of bed, love herself enough to eat, love herself enough to see daylight. Like very, very simple things, not like, huge self-esteem. It's just enough to take the next step. And all we focused on was like the ultimate destination, which was feeling well, like mentally well, the immediate next step, whatever that little step is, and just feel like you're enough to take that little step. She translated that into a business. She thought other young women need to hear this, Dad, and I'm going to preach this message. So she started a business. I thought, who's going to buy this? I mean, I didn't say it to her, but that's what I thought. I thought
it's a good thing you didn't say that to her.
And of course, I was the angel investor and the financial controller and all that. She was like the Elon Musk, as she described it to me, like a 15-year-old Elon Musk with this big enterprise. She started this business, and she was making like T-shirts and caps and things like just with NUFF print on, nothing else. I thought, who's going to buy that? Sure enough, we put it on Facebook and we sold out in one afternoon.
Oh,
wow, bravo.
Well, she sold out in one afternoon. And then and that business of hers is still going, and she reinvests the money that she made into, this is how it loops back to storytelling. She reinvests that back into a charity called Batir. And Batir are an organization that run workshops for young women with self-esteem issues, telling them to tell a different story.
Beautiful.
It's really weird how it just comes around in a circle.
Yeah.
If you follow it long enough, it comes around in a circle. Sorry, you go.
Do you believe, Anthony, and we just got into the subject of anxiety, and then we've got this generation that instead of sitting around and talking more and storytelling and real communication, we are, or they are, on their devices. Now,
Mm.
Yeah,
texting is not communication,
no,
and
that's right.
social media is not really communication. So are we meant to be a bit scared almost that this next generation is not able to pitch a really good story or to bring out a good story because
Yeah.
the communication skills are almost like not
Zero.
working as well? I didn't
Uh,
think I was going to ask you this question, but we were talking about anxiety and teenagers, and I often think, guys, you won't be able to speak if you're just texting.
Mm.
yeah. That's so much my hot button, Celeste. Over the past couple of years, I've learned a lot about anxiety. Because when I was a boy, I was taught by an old school dad that said, "Get a feeling, push it down,"
Mm.
which isn't that healthy in itself, right? I'm
No.
not suggesting you do that. A couple of things you mentioned, and through working with Batia and working with Belle, and hearing her teach me a lot about anxiety, particularly anxiety felt by young women, the couple of things that come to mind. One of them is some Apple research that goes back to 1996, and they found that they're looking at mobile phone usage, and they found that both the length and number of conversations has fallen every year for the past 20 years. So people are having less conversations,
Right.
less conversations, and they're shorter. Uh, Alongside that, some Pew research in the US suggests that Americans have never been more polarized and less likely to change their point of view.
Mm.
In the years that they've been studying these pieces. And what's most concerning about social media, it's the texting, which is not communicating, but 80% of current mobile phone usage, 80% is short form video, like TikTok and YouTube
Mm.
Shorts and so forth. And I believe the reason that's happening is because they're anxious, that those short-term videos give them a quick dopamine hit, and
Mm.
they get a quick relief, if you like, from the anxiety. Then it goes back again. That's why it's so addictive. That's what I believe. That's why it's so addictive. That's
Yes.
why they're not doing it because they like watching things for 30 seconds. They're doing it because they want relief from their anxiety.
True.
And I looked at some Lumina research recently too, because I love looking at, like, who says that, where does it come from? And they found, I mean, we came off very high levels of teenage anxiety before COVID, and now it's even higher.
Totally higher. You know, Peter, my studio manager was telling me yesterday, every time we call a prospect who reached out to us through either email or through our Facebook, and we reach out with a phone call, we get zero response. But
Yeah,
if we text them right afterwards, they respond right away.
yeah,
And I
isn't that
said, well,
interesting?
that's very interesting. I said,
Yeah,
because they don't want to talk. They
I
don't
don't
No.
want
want
to
to talk.
communicate, even though they're looking to buy something from me, right? This is my
Yeah,
manager telling me we have an issue. And I'm like, well, how do we solve this issue? It's very difficult because I need to get on the phone with them, right?
yeah,
So we reach out, they don't answer. And then we say, well, what's the next thing that we're going to do? We do two things. We send them an email and we text them.
yeah.
And even the emails, they're not responding to as fast as the text.
Wow.
So then what we do on the text is like, we really would love to communicate with you. When is a good time to talk?
Yeah,
And then sometimes if we do that, the communication goes down because they don't respond to that particular text.
yeah.
But they will
They don't want
respond to like, what is a good time for you to come in? But they don't want to talk on the phone.
to know. And it's interesting you say that, Raphael, because that same Lumina research I saw said that post-COVID, personality-wise, uh, we are more introverted, we are more pessimistic, and less likely to engage in social contact post-COVID. It's just left us all a bit scared. Scared of the government, scared of pharmaceutical companies, scared of being close to people. I mean, I hated it because I'm a hugger. I love hugging people.
Right.
And I like that feeling of giving a friend a hug. And in my swim group, we meet in the morning, we give each other a hug, go for a swim, and it's part of how we communicate with each other. And it's nice feeling that warmth and that relationship.
It's the most amazing thing. I'm a hugger
it
too.
made it really. I felt weird. It just felt. I'm not. Yeah. But that's true. That's true. And the interesting thing is, what I find, Raphael, is that means the conversations when you do have them are more important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book on this. I'm halfway through my book on stories. I haven't finished it yet because I keep changing the damn thing. I keep rewriting it, thinking of new things.
Can't wait to read it.
I've got to stop. The publisher said, you've got to stop changing it. I said, but I've got more good stuff.
That's when you have to do book 1, book 2, book 3.
Yes.
The first one I wrote at airport lounges, because I was traveling so much, I just used the time in the lounges to write. But the first one I wrote was on conversations, and it's about having collaborative conversations. And I said there's a magic in having a collaborative conversation. I called it Collabradabra. That's the magic of a collaborative conversation. Now, we're having less conversations, which means they're more important. When you have them, they're much more important because you don't get as many chances as you used to.
No.
You're not walking around an office having 20 conversations. You might have one conversation a day. So you better make that one work.
Peter, you know why we started this show so Celeste and I could communicate.
And sorry, I get a bit passionate about this stuff too. I mean, one of my clients bought me a soapbox I could stand on because I'm always like,
Yeah.
I'm really into it. I think, yeah.
I read you've got 20 years experience in 12 different countries
yeah.
well. And
yeah.
I worked in theatre all my life, and I have so many different experiences while working with different cultures and working backstage. It's very about communication as well. And so tell me, cultural wise, is there a very big difference, obviously, in teaching some people or some cultures than others to really bring out their ideas with confidence and the way they speak? Because cultures are so different as well in how to communicate.
It's hugely different, Celeste. It's different than it's the same. I had a little bit of a inferiority complex for the rest of the world. Because we grew up looking at two superpowers, the UK and the US, right? The US is like politically dominant, runs the world, looks after freedom. It's got the biggest army in the Navy. Like we look up to them and all the movies and all the cultural pieces. And the UK, we still have the King of England as our head of state. So we've got a lot of culture there too. So little on us, when you start traveling overseas and people working overseas, got a lot of cringe. You think, wow, who am I to be talking to these guys? I can talk about cultural differences enormously, but one I think that could be really interesting and worthwhile is that in many Asian cultures, and the first place I worked in Asia was in China, in Beijing and in Shanghai, and my Chinese friends won't mind me saying this. Chinese business people tend to be more introverted than Westerners when you first meet them. They're more introverted. So they're a bit harder to crack. So you've got a room full. If I'm running a workshop in Beijing, I'll get no response at all. Then I'm very animated, and they'll just sit there looking at me like I'm a robot. What I found, and I had to really look at this introversion more closely, particularly in some of these Asian cultures, is that because I thought introverts are detached. I thought, introverts don't like human contact. They don't like having relationships. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Extroverts have a lot of, like in the West, and particularly some cities in the US, including New York, including Dallas, including LA. And Miami and Boston. I mean, most of the US cities I've worked in, a lot of people that are very good at, like I remember one guy I worked with in Dallas. He was working for a big organization selling engines to aircraft manufacturers. Once I heard it was big, probably imagine what it was. And one of the exercises I do, I video people and I say, can you give me an impression of, like, we ask the group for impressions of each person. Like, we watch Celeste, we say, Celeste makes her presentation, does her picture. What impressions is Celeste creating? We're looking for gestural language and that sort of thing. And I use a lot of acting training techniques too. You'd love this, Celeste. And this guy, kid you not, his name was Bucky, right? His first name was Bucky. I said, Bucky, what impressions have you got of yourself? And he said, Peter, distractingly attractive, he said. I said, distracting. I thought he must have been kidding, because we're very sarcastic here, right? I thought he must be joking. And he said, oh, no, I'm distractingly attractive. And the problem I've got, what I'm selling, is that people get so distracted by how attractive I am, they just don't listen to what I'm saying. And that was a genuine delusion he had, right? He genuinely felt that way. Now, this is like a tall, lanky Texan with the cowboy boots and the canary yellow suit, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And
well, courage and confidence was there, Anthony, wasn't it?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
I love that. That stuck in my brain, distracting. So I come across a lot of extroverts in the West. In the East, or I won't put them all together because they're all very different. But in a lot of Asian countries, they're much more introverted. But in fact, they build deeper relationships. They have less relationships, but the ones that they have are deeper. So
long lasting.
Yeah. As soon as you can like enter that relationship space with them, you'll have a friend for life, and they'll go much deeper with you. With extroverts, they'll form a relationship with you quicker, but it's always very surface level. They don't go, because they've got so many people to engage.
Yeah.
They can't get as deep.
No.
What I found in Asian cultures, initially you think, God, these guys are cold. But in fact, they're not cold at all. They just take time to get to know you and to feel comfortable with you, and then they're more willing to engage and trust you. It just takes a bit longer. Then once you do, they're a scream. They crack you up. They're the funniest people I know.
What I found, Peter, what I find with people like that is that they're the ones that go home and they're alone. Right?
What, the extroverts?
Yeah.
Yes, often they are.
They're very alone.
They've got so many friends, but no, they don't. They've got a lot of surface level relationships, but they're easier to meet because they're very engaging and funny and tell jokes and all that sort of stuff. But it's hard to get any depth. I mean, I remember one. I was working with you'd love this, Celeste. I was working with a good friend of mine, Arabella, who's a classically trained actress and an opera singer, right? And I took her on workshops with her because the clients loved her, because she would burst into opera and then use the opera as a way of talking about projection and gestural language and all these acting training exercises. And she would come to these programs and teach people how to access themselves. And she used a beautiful phrase in one of the workshops we worked with. It was in the US, won't say where. And she said, I just can't stand these guys. She said, when you first meet them, you just see surface. And underneath that surface, there's just more surface. There's no depth. Because she wanted to get down into the depth. There's nothing there. So that's one big cultural difference I've noticed. But you get to places like Egypt. I've worked in Cairo in Egypt. Egyptians are very cool people, because their civilization's thousands of years old.
Yes.
We still can't work out how they built the pyramids.
Oh, let's have an episode about that.
We can't. The best engineers in the world still can't work out how they did it.
No.
They're some of the smartest people in the world, and also some of the most ancient at the same time. And I ran a program there for some people who are running a global cargo company, and these guys were ex-ship captains that got together and started a global transport company based on shipping. Like, they were putting knocking down, they call it CKD, knocking down cars into a crate and then reassembling them on site. And these guys, at morning tea, they were drinking whiskey and smoking cigars. And at lunchtime, they were like smoking fulls and drinking like whiskey on the rocks.
For breakfast.
At morning tea time, I'm thinking coffee, tea, no, well, let's have a whiskey. Whiskey? I can't drink whiskey at all, let alone in the morning.
Mm,
and they were discussing their hunting trips, where they were going hunting on that weekend together, because
mm,
they love shooting things, right? So whole different culture again,
right.
whole different culture again. It's and I love it though. I love visiting these places and getting immersed in it, and you get really good because you're with the locals. You get like deep in the local culture. Like the good restaurants, the good places to go on weekends. Get the great stories from them. It's I love it. It's really really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. Peter, I think, and Celeste probably is going to agree with me on this one. We could probably talk for hours.
I know
Uh,
this.
we're very, very
Probably listen for
engaged in.
hours.
We're very engaged in everything that you're talking about, and the fact that you're teaching us about different concepts of communication, the way we actually even engage with other people, the different levels of engagement, if you will, that we can easily have or even avoid, right? Because some
Mm.
communication you want to avoid, right? But guess what? We're almost out of time. I think we're going to go a little bit longer, right, Celeste, today?
Yes, I
And
mean, I had so many amazing questions
I
for
know
I'm
you
Peter.
sure
did.
you did,
I know you
Celeste.
did.
The beautiful thing is we went into very important subjects like anxiety, and you just also mentioned, Raphael, some communication you want to avoid, and so many people don't have the word no. They
Right.
don't have it's not in my nature to speak about this conversation, and
Mm,
actually are able to stop a conversation as well, because it's not about teaching how to pitch and to how to communicate, but also to maybe stop a conversation or not be
Yeah,
involved in a bad conversation.
oh yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about stories, and I mean, the two primary things we've talked about are stories and conversations. And if I could leave you with a message, it would uh, be very mindful of the conversations you're having with yourself, like your explanatory style, like how you explain things to yourself. Be very mindful of the stories you tell yourself and what stories you believe to be true.
Mm.
And think about having conversations that are with yourself that are optimistic about the future in terms of bad events, making them short-lived, making them not catastrophize, always taking personal responsibility for how you're thinking. And with regards to the stories, just think about what stories you're telling yourself,
Hmm.
and uh, think about think about getting in touch with your particular hero's journey in your story,
Yeah.
and do the same with others. I mean, have more conversations with people,
Yeah.
litter those conversations with stories, as I hope I've attempted to do with you guys this morning for you, tonight for me. Uh, and you'll notice your life will change. It will dramatically change because it's therapeutic for yourself if you're your best therapist, and it is building more meaningful and deeper relationships with others. And if you look at the number one marker in positive psychology for self-reported happiness, it's the quality of the relationships, and the
Mm,
quality of the conversations and stories you share with each other is the quality of the relationship. So you'll be likely to be feeling better and more mentally well, and you'll be developing deeper, more meaningful, more resourceful relationships where you're both leaving yourself better off, which is the ideal relationship. We're both better off as a result of the relationship. That's
without a
why
doubt.
I'm so passionate about it. That's why I love it. That's why I get so animated about it, because I found the secret sauce. I found the 11 herbs and spices.
And
You,
it's
you know,
very,
one of the things that I love the fact that yes, we got to. It's the stories we tell ourselves, right? But it's also the words we use because the
Yeah,
words may impact on the
yeah,
stories, right? So to me, when I think about a wordsmith, I think about somebody like crafting a word and thinking of that one particular word and the true meaning that they're trying to express behind that word. So telling a story, it's also about the actual words that you're telling or you're trying to convey, and especially to yourself, because I always believe before you can help anyone, you got to help yourself. You got to take care of number one, And it's not
Exactly.
about
Exactly. Yeah.
being selfish, because if we're not selfish, how can we help anyone else?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. It's like you go to a gym. I went to a gym with a mate of mine a couple of weeks ago, and he was looking for a personal trainer because he's put on a lot of weight.
Mm,
I'm looking around the gym and I'm thinking some of these personal trainers don't look that healthy and fit at all themselves. I mean, you've got to be like
some
look
are
like what
not.
you're selling. You know what I mean? I don't mean like being Mr. Universe or like The Rock, but I mean look healthy and fit and look vibrant and
Yeah.
look like someone that I'd like to be like if I want to be trained by you. Obviously, you've got the secret sauce. If you look like that, I want to look like that too.
Right.
It's
That's why you got
the
to go
same.
swimming every morning.
And yeah, that's my thing. But you mentioned a beautiful point too, Elder Raphael, about kids. I mean, uh, kids see what you do before they believe what you say. That like
Mm,
you are what they see. It doesn't matter what you're telling them. I mean,
yeah.
No,
it's the
that's
same
right.
as in a romantic relationship. I mean, it's what you do, not what you say. I mean, it's a verb. What you're
Yeah.
doing is the verbs speak louder than the nouns do. That's what I found. What you're
You
doing
know,
speaks louder than what you're talking about.
before we came on live, we had a situation, didn't we? All three of us. And we were dying. We were laughing because you could not hear us because your headphones were not working.
Yeah.
But we were able to communicate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I
We
was
were
going,
doing
I hear you.
sign language, and we were laughing at what you were doing. You were so
Yeah.
calm, so relaxed,
Listen,
and it was like until it was 30 seconds before we went live, and then boom, you were able to hear us.
I can hear
And
you.
that is true communication right there. When
That's
you
right.
think about the eyes, right? Because the
Yeah.
eyes are going to see something. And even though
Yeah.
two people or even 500 people may see the same thing,
Yeah.
their interpretation of that image, of that story is so different. You talked about watching Tom Cruise, and I love that movie. And my girlfriend actually said, I'm really surprised that the movie was so darn good. And I
Mm.
said, yeah, it was really good, because she did not expect it to be good, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. She said, you
Yeah.
can't do better than the first one. And it
mm,
actually was really good.
Yeah.
mm,
Arguably as good or better than the first one.
Correct.
Different, obviously. It's also the
Mhm,
story of Tom Cruise. I mean, it's his
mhm.
story. I mean, he was Maverick in the beginning, and now he's Maverick now. It's very much him too. So yeah, I mean, there's some personal issues I don't necessarily agree with in his life, but as an actor, I think he's awesome. And you think,
Right.
well,
Agreed.
that's a delight to be able to enjoy his skill in
Mhm.
telling that story.
Anthony, I would love, because I know what that sound is. Raphael or literally has to run to the next show, and it is really important for me to share with people how they can get hold of you, because we were talking about your amazing workshops. All kinds of different people can come to you, learning how to communicate, how to
Mhm.
have more resilience, more courage, no matter what culture they're from, joining your workshops, buying the book Collabradabra. Love the name, obviously.
That is a great book.
And so under Peter Anthony Consulting, that is
That's
how
it.
people find you.
Yeah, that's how they can find me. Peter Anthony Consulting. You can find me on the web. You can find me on YouTube. You can find Collabradabra everywhere. It's the only
Yes,
Collabradabra in the world.
yes, it's a brilliant name. I mean,
And if you
coming
want
from theatre, I love it.
to
Well,
reach
well,
out to
here's one
me,
thing, right,
you go,
Peter?
yeah. I
You
was going to
like
say, if they want to
hugs.
reach out, I mean, if you got any questions on stories or these conversation pieces, drop me a note. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on YouTube. I'm on the web. Uh, Peter Anthony at peteranthonyconsulting.com is my email address. Shoot me. I'd love to share some resources and ideas with you. Just reach out. I love sharing ideas on this stuff.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. So you
Yeah.
say you like hugs, and I'm a hugger too, and we all need to hug. Here's the thing, right? I'm having an event in New York, so it's going to be a great time for you to come, and all three of us are going
Ah,
to have a big group hug.
oh,
Yeah.
So
cool.
it's going to be sometime in June. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty on the details, and we're looking to have just an amazing, amazing time. We'd love to
Wow.
have you there.
I'd love to be there.
Yeah.
I'd love to be. I love New York. I prefer winter in New York, though, Raphael.
You like
No.
winter?
I love the
No.
cold.
I was just going to say it's going to be warm enough. Don't worry, Anthony. For us Australians, it'll be June. Don't worry. And there's you going, I love the cold.
I love the cold. I mean,
I'll
I
make sure
love
that they have no hot water in your hotel. How's that?
I'm not staying at the same hotel.
What surprise, Raphael? I follow a guy called Wim Hof, the Iceman,
Mhm.
and I
Yes.
like taking ice baths.
With the long
Yeah.
beard.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
very
yes,
cool.
Yeah.
Ice.
Yes.
Ice.
The videos make me scared almost. Yeah, no, I'm I think throughout this year, I would love to do another episode because we went into quite like a few interesting subjects, what you do in your workshop. And I'd love to talk about that more because I do believe a lot of people are more into their devices. They
Mhm.
find it easier not to take the responsibility of their words and their face and the eye contact.
Right.
So that would be something, after the few workshops that you're having at the beginning of this year, that we go more into detail like that you share those experiences with us, please.
Fantastic. I'd love to. I'd love to
Yeah.
see you in June in New York. If that's
Fine. Yeah. We
if
can
you
be on
Bam,
the
bam,
same.
bam. We're gonna be there. Love it. Love it.
we can line up. It's been
And,
very awesome
Peter,
talking to
I
you,
got to
mate.
tell you, 2 names. You have 2 names. Peter
Again.
Anthony.
Yes,
I love it.
I know. I've got to. Yeah, I was raised in a poor neighbourhood, Raphael. We couldn't afford surnames where I lived. We just got 2 first ones. I like some of these Italian and Greek names. They're really interesting. Mine's pretty boring. It's just anyway. That's
I love it.
how it is.
I love it.
That's how it is.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Peter, so much for being here with us. Really
Pleasure.
appreciate you. We're definitely going to have episode 2 coming up at one point or
Absolutely.
another.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
be in touch for sure. For sure.
Perfect. Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Celeste. Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye.
You guys take care.
Bye.